Hi, I'm Alix Smullin, and I'm here today with Jim Ware to have a conversation with Jim about his years as academic dean at the Harvard T.H. Chan School of Public Health. This conversation is one in a series about Jim's productive and multifaceted career. I was asked to fulfill my role here today because I served as chief of staff in the dean's office during the last 10 years that Jim was academic dean. So Jim, shall we begin?
We can, and it's so nice, Alix, to do something with you again. I really enjoyed working with you in the dean's office, and I'm glad you were asked to do this.
Thank you. So Jim, let's start with how you got to become academic dean.
Well, actually, it's kind of an interesting story, I think. I was drawn to school-wide activities and served on different school committees and got to know Harvey Feinberg through those activities. And when came time to choose a new department chair in 1990, Harvey invited me and Nan both up to visit with him. And I expected him to ask me to be department chair. But in fact, he quite surprised me by asking me to be the academic dean. And fortunately, that was a better job for me, fit better my interests and skills. And actually, I recall that Harvey called me before that meeting to ask me who I thought should be considered for academic dean, and I suggested Milt Weinstein, which in retrospect was a flawed suggestion because it would have been two professors from the same department, but that was just an example of how little I knew about what it takes to run a school. Anyway, Harvey asked me to be academic dean, and I was excited to do it. It fit my interests, and so I accepted and started on July 1st, 1990.
Great. So you started on July 1st of 1990, and you want to just, for the records, go through how long you were dean, who the deans were.
So then I served with Harvey, which was a wonderful experience, and in 1997 he was asked to be provost. And so I believe it was July 1st, 1997. He stepped up to that role, and then I became acting dean for a short period. I can't remember whether it was 6 months or a year and a half. I think it was a year and a half.
I'm quite sure.
Because when I looked at the notes about Dean Bloom, it said that he was appointed in 1998, but he actually didn't begin to serve until January 1st, 1999. So that was a pretty long period. And as it happened, my wife and I were the masters of Cabot House in Harvard College. So that was a pretty brutal time in terms of responsibilities. Because I didn't know how long I would be acting dean, I didn't appoint an acting academic dean or someone to help. And so I was in a position of having three roles: acting dean, effectively still academic dean, and master of Cabot House. So, wow.
Busy time.
I was pretty busy.
And generally, how would you describe the role of the academic dean? What's their...
Well, I like to think that and it was true in my experience, that the academic dean is sits at the right hand of the dean, and is an important has an important role in affecting the decisions of the dean. And so both the deans I served under had weekly meetings of senior staff, and when you joined, you became a part of that small group, and all of our strategic decisions were discussed there. So I felt that I was involved in the highest level decisions of the school. But in addition to that role, I had some direct responsibilities for the Office of Academic Affairs, which managed appointments and other aspects of faculty life. The Office of Student Services, which is admissions, financial aid, and so on, and the Division of Continuing Professional Education. And so the heads of those three offices reported to me, and I was directly responsible for their performance and effectiveness.
So in any of those areas, were there particular aspects of that role that, or the way those offices operated and evolved during your tenure that are worthy of note?
Well,
leadership, et cetera.
The Office of Academic Affairs, I was very fortunate to have Bernita Anderson as the associate dean, and so that was a very stable office throughout my deanship. Our biggest challenges came during the period when President Summers was leading the university, and we had a great deal of difficulty harmonizing our approach to appointments with what we had perceived to be his expectations, and our appointments were always difficult and challenging. That had not been true prior to his deanship, presidency. One of the things President Summers did was take a more active role in appointments across the university, which I think was appropriate, but one had the sense he wasn't satisfied with the way we were doing business, and we never were able to overcome that feeling with him. But that has considerably quieted now that we have new leadership at the university. With the Office of Student Services, that office was in somewhat turmoil when I became academic dean, and there was a period when the office there was internal conflicts and dysfunction of various kinds. But when Stan Hudson was hired to be associate dean, he proved to be a marvelous appointment and really brought that office together, and it became a strength of the school. Right. Continuing professional education was led for most of my term by David Shore, and David was a hard worker and an ambitious dean, but it's a difficult area because it's not the role of continuing professional education is not so clear in public health, particularly from a financial point of view. The medical school has enormous success with refresher courses on GI surgery, for example, and there aren't ready analogs of that in public health, and so it was always a challenge how to make that area financially and academically successful.
But it seems like one of the lessons is the importance of some of the people in those key leadership roles.
Absolutely.
In terms of the overall issues that the school was facing during your tenure as academic dean, were there particularly interesting developments that you would point to that impacted the direction of the school?
Well, looking at the positives first, that one of the major achievements during Dean Feinberg's term was the very successful capital campaign that we had. And that was really probably, at that time, far more significant than anything the school had ever achieved before in that area. And you, in fact, were involved in that.
Yes.
And, of course, the major gift during that effort was the gift for the François Bagnoud Center for Health and Human Rights, which included the resources to build the Xavier Bagnoud building.
Right.
So that was an important addition to our physical space, and also brought health and human rights to the forefront. And we were able to recruit Jonathan Mann to the school, and he was himself a major figure in health and human rights, a linkage that hadn't really been recognized and celebrated until that very period. And so that's been a legacy for the school, that health and human rights is still a major theme in our school's activities. And so that was a very important development. And I would say, in addition, the school grew quite substantially during that period. It was a period of financial stability. We were doing well. All of our research programs were thriving. The federal climate was very supportive. And so we were able to make positive moves to strengthen our academic programs, strengthen our faculty, expand our student degree programs, and so on.
Right. It seems another development that was facilitated during that time had to do with the reorganization of our biological sciences.
That's correct. Because of some retirements and departures, we had the opportunity to rethink what the biological sciences would look like, and that led to the creation of two major departments, genetics and complex diseases, and the Department of I think is it called infectious diseases, but that's its
Immunology
mission.
and infectious.
Immunology and infectious diseases, and those turned out to be a nice alignment in terms of the direction our research was going, and both of those departments have thrived. So that was an important, and Gokhan Hotemishigul and Diane Worth have become the leaders in those two areas,
Right.
and they both have very rich and interesting research portfolios.
Another area that was expanded during that time had to do with our AIDS work in Africa.
Yes, now that came more on Dean Bloom's watch, but there was this very odd moment where for example, I can't remember the exact dates, but early November, say,
Right.
the federal government announced that there was going to be this massive financial commitment to addressing the AIDS epidemic in Africa, and that individual institutions would receive awards of the order of $100 million a year. But the deadline for the applications was something like January 15th. It was completely
Right.
crazy. But Max Essex and Phyllis Kankey organized an effort to prepare an application. Now, we thought that was in the ordinary course of business at the school, but President Summers learned about our plans to apply for this through an article in the Boston Globe, and he was not happy. And of course, this had a political element in that it was an effort by George Bush
Right.
to win over some of his critics. And I suspect President Summers didn't care for the motivation for the PEPFAR program. But in any case, he was very hostile initially to our effort, but he did allow us to go forward. They did prepare and submit an application, and we won the application to work with 3 countries in sub-Saharan Africa to help them develop a response to the AIDS epidemic. It was an enormously difficult job, especially because the university was hovering over the program the entire the first few years of its activities. And Phyllis was a stalwart because she received a lot of criticism, a lot of advice about how to behave and so on, and how to run the program. But despite all the difficulties, the program persevered. It had made a major impact in all 3 countries, and in recent years has been looked upon as a major achievement and as a real success. So I think Max and Phyllis deserve commendation for their commitment to undertake the PEPFAR program.
Right. Looking again on the positive, are there areas of your specific contribution to the school over the course of your academic deanship that you'd like to
Well, so many
commemorate?
things happened, and it gave me a moment to stop and think about things that I thought I made a contribution that made a difference. And one of those areas had to do with the Clinical Effectiveness Program, which is a program led by a group of faculty, mostly at the medical school initially, who were training young physicians who wanted to pursue careers in clinical research. And they were looking for a home for a master's degree program. And initially, Harvey was quite skeptical because he thought that our mission was public health, not medicine. But I saw this as a real opportunity and campaigned, and Harvey supported me to pursue the recruitment of the Clinical Effectiveness Program, at that time led by Lee Goldman, who went on to higher positions at other universities later. But in any case, they did agree, Lee and his colleagues agreed to place their MPH program at the School of Public Health, and that program now has of order of 150 students a year entering that program. It's a huge part of our MPH program now, and these are people of the highest quality because almost all of them now, probably 80 to 90%, come from Harvard hospitals, and they're physicians who've chosen to pursue careers with a public health and clinical research dimension. And so it's really strengthened our student body and made the school as a whole a more interesting place to be a student. So I'm really pleased that they came. They've stayed with us. We've had to re-recruit them every several years, and it's been a great relationship for everybody. So I'm proud of that. Secondly, something that I feel a task on which I think I made a difference has to do with our PhD programs.
Right.
So the PhD programs at Harvard are administered by the Graduate School of Arts and Sciences, which is really primarily under the auspices of the Faculty of Arts and Sciences. So in order to have a PhD program, you have to go to another faculty and persuade them that the program is of the appropriate caliber. So our first effort in this regard was to create a PhD program in biologic science. And this was largely Diane Worth's effort and her colleagues, and I helped and supported but didn't play a central role, really. But Diana first achieved this goal by approaching the Division of Medical Sciences, which is the Harvard Medical School's effort to have PhD programs, and persuaded them that our program was of the same caliber as theirs and could be included in the Division of Medical Sciences. So we initially got the authority to grant the PhD degree as part of the Division of Medical Sciences. Then Diane decided that the next step was to really become independent and become a separate home for PhD programs. And she then undertook that effort again, which took about 2 years, and succeeded. And so we had our first PhD program. Now, I was immediately concerned because I felt that was a vulnerability. If we only had one PhD program, is it a stable situation? And so I thought about other programs at the school which would be good candidates. And the Department of Biostatistics had a doctoral program which had all the features that the PhD programs would want, or that the graduate school would want. And so we undertook an effort to have the PhD program in biostatistics. And that, again, was a 2-year effort of enormous amount of documentation and so on. And finally, we reached the penultimate stage at which we met with the committee overseeing the graduate programs in the PhD programs. And Nan was chair at that time. Nan and I went to that meeting, and we met with the committee and we presented the materials, and it was clear the tenor was quite positive. And I remember Don Rubin, who was chair of the Department of Statistics at that time, arrived late to the meeting, and the chair of the committee asked, "Dr. Rubin, do you have any comments?" And Don Rubin's response was, "Well, I can't find any reason to object."
Very welcoming.
Yes, and so that's Don Rubin for you. And they granted us the authority to have a PhD program in biostatistics. So now we have, up until Dean Frank's tenure, we had 2 PhD programs, and they've both done well and are well regarded by the university. And it's not only the PhD programs themselves, but it shows that scholarship in public health has the same stature intellectually as scholarship in the other fields recognized for the PhD degree. So that was an important step toward recognition of the work we do at the School of Public Health.
Yep. And then another area that was a big area of your responsibility, of course, was involved in recruitments.
Yes, of course I was involved in lots of recruitments because that fell into my area of responsibility. But occasionally I was able to play what I thought was an influential role, or either in the advocacy or in the recruitment. And when I think of that, I think in particular of Dr. Shi-Hung Lin, who was at the University of Michigan, and who I felt very strongly was an excellent candidate. But that was not controversial. The hard part was recruiting Dr. Lin. Dr. Lin is a very good negotiator and very clear about her goals. And so it took a lot of work and a lot of persuading, but I'm so pleased she decided to come to Harvard. She, not long after coming to Harvard, she won the most prestigious award in statistics, the so-called Presidents of Statistical Societies, or COPS Award, and it's given each year to one statistician viewed to be the most influential figure in all the fields of statistics. So she won that award in 2008, I believe it was, and then she came and was very successful in building a program in quantitative genetics at the school, and then this year was appointed chair of the department, and I'm just so pleased the way she's taken hold and the kind of leadership she's demonstrated. So I'm so glad that I was able to be a positive force for recruiting her to Harvard.
Yep. So looking to some of the challenges, were there particular areas that were challenges when you were dean and may still be for the school that you would note?
And you and I have talked about this. One of the most difficult areas for our school and for almost every university in the country, or certainly many universities, is the issue of diversity, particularly with respect to African American representation. We have just not been successful in building a strong representation of black faculty at the Harvard School of Public Health. We've had better luck with our students because students of color are interested in public health. And so we have had some success in recruiting excellent students. But at the faculty level, it's harder. And it's a complex picture because even among the relatively smaller number of African Americans who pursue academic careers, if they're interested in health, it's so much more attractive to become a physician. And so disproportionately, young students who are considering careers in health go to medical school. Now that's again a reason why the clinical effectiveness program is important, because as they get along in their careers, they reconnect with their interest in public health and population health, and now they can have an opportunity to come and study with us. So we have some success there. But still, to bring them up to the faculty level is very difficult, and it really have failed to this point to be successful to the level we'd like to be. So that's one area of difficulty for us. Another major problem for us is space. We're physically constrained by our location, and our faculty are interwoven with their neighboring schools and institutions. So we just have not been able to, thank goodness for the FXB building, because other than that, we've not been able to expand our campus, and our core buildings are in dire need of replacement or renewal. And so I don't know how that problem is going to be resolved. We hoped it was going to be resolved by moving to the Alston campus, even though that was extremely controversial. But the financial upheaval of 2008 completely brought that process to a halt.
Right. Well, just before I go to the, really sort of winding down, just want to make sure there isn't anything that we haven't touched on that you thought was particularly important related to your...
Well, we've covered a lot of ground, I think.
Yeah, okay.
I'm sure somebody else would think of something.
So anything you might have done differently?
Oh, I sometimes wonder why, when we look back, our failings and mistakes are more salient in our memories than our successes.
Right.
And so there are plenty of things I could talk about I would like to have done differently, that I didn't know how I made mistakes in working with people, people reporting to me. One of the hardest things to do is to find a way to fire someone or let someone go.
Right.
And the first couple of attempts at that on my part were disastrous. I just completely mishandled them. I thought the solution was to tell them how terrible they were and why I had to fire them, which is absolutely wrong. That's not the way to go about it at all, but I had to learn that. So that was there are a set of mistakes I made in those areas that I would like to undo. But I think the general feeling is too soon, old, too late, smart. And so I think that all of us would look back and think of things we would do differently. Yeah.
Right. So we're headed to a new administration here at the school. Any thoughts on that score?
Well, what I wanted to say on this topic was how much I admire what Dean Frank accomplished. That he had a relatively short tenure, and he came with a vision, which is absolutely critical, and I hope our next dean comes with a vision. And his vision was, he was very focused on the 100th anniversary of the school, and really organized a whole set of activities and a sense of purpose for our faculty and our community around that. Secondly, he had a vision about restructuring education, and he brought all of our academic doctoral programs into the PhD, got them approved as PhD programs in a kind of umbrella strategy. And so now every academic doctoral program at the school leads to the PhD. And so that is huge. Then it means that all the students are financially supported. It means we're highly selective in whom we recruit. And it's just been a tremendous step forward. He launched the Doctor of Public Health program for professionals interested in public health, and that's a major accomplishment. And he also restructured our master's degree programs, including launching the first ever blended MPH, blended degree program at Harvard, the blended MPH, which includes both residential and online learning. That's the first degree program at Harvard to allow an online component. And it's a test case for whether Harvard is going to expand in that realm. So he really did enormous things in our in strengthening our degree programs and rationalizing them. Secondly, he was successful in attracting a major gift from Gerald Chan, Dr. Gerald Chan, a graduate of our school, whose family gave $350 million, at that time the largest gift ever to Harvard. And it has the potential to transform a lot of what we do. And so that was a major achievement. And our capital campaign got off to a very strong start, in large part due to his help. And finally, he launched a review of our research agenda, which is ongoing under the leadership of Dean Hunter.
Great.
So as to advice to the next leaders of our school, I would not be so bold. That we did our best. We tried to make the school stronger and better. And I think on the whole we achieved that, although nothing is ever perfect. But I think the derivative was the correct one. And I wish the very best to the next set of leaders of our school.
Jim, thank you very much. This was really extremely enjoyable, and I
Nice
loved
to talk
working
with you, Alix.
on it with you and conducting this interview today. Thank you again.